Good morning on the presenter and participation, and welcome back to Zoom number 10. And I would like to say that welcome all of you to the virtual TESOL International Convention 2021. And on behalf of the organizing committee, we would like to thank you so much for your participation and contribution to our annual convention success. We are Tuna and Duy, the presentation moderators today. We are so delighted to see all of you in this parallel session, and we hope that it will be a good chance for all of you to gain the valuable knowledge and experience. And before the presentation, there are a few considerations in case that you have any questions or concern. So please feel free to leave them in the comment section so that we can gather the questions for easy response in the Q&A session. And please remember that the Q&A session lasts for only 5 to 10 minutes. And so now I think that it's time for us to welcome the two presenters, Ms. Minh Hue Nguyen and Ms. Xuan Minh Ngo, in the presentation on emotion, agency, and identity, an activity theory perspective on Vietnamese pre-service English teachers' professional becoming. About our presenter, Ms. Minh Hue Nguyen, she is a lecturer in TESOL education, Monash University, Melbourne, Australia, and her research interests are in the areas of teacher professional identity, teacher emotion, teacher agency, teacher education mentoring, and content language teacher collaboration. And the second presenter, Mr. Xuan Minh Ngo, he is a PhD candidate at the University of Queensland, Australia, and his research interests lie in the intersection of language assessment, language policy, and teacher education. And he also have appeared in some kinds of the volumes that have been published. And so now I will let the screen turn to Ms. Xuan Minh Ngo, Mr. Xuan Minh Ngo and Ms. Minh Hue Nguyen. So please, the two presenters.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for turning up for our presentation. I'm Ming, and with me today is Dr. Hue, the lead investigator of our research project. So our presentation is entitled Emotion, Agency and Identity, an Activity Theory Perspective on Vietnamese Pre-Service English Teachers' Professional Becoming. So in our presentation, we'll start with the background to the study. Then I will talk briefly about the key literature, then the research questions. After that, Dr. Hue will detail our theoretical framework, the methods, and report some major findings from our research project. Finally, I'll wrap up the presentation with the conclusion and some recommendations. So let's start with the first part, background to the study. So when people discuss teacher education, they would tend to talk about the competencies and also the knowledge modules that teachers are supposed to acquire to become competent. However, our research interest is a bit different. So our conception of teacher education could be expressed as learning to teach is also learning to be someone who teaches, to feel like a teacher and act like a teacher. In other words, we are particularly interested in teacher identity, teacher sense of self, teacher emotion, and then teacher agency, or the socio-culturally mediated capacity to act. And because of and these constructs have been studied from multiple theoretical perspectives. We can name a few like the ecological approach by Norton, post-structuralism by K. Ada, and the social cognitive by Bandura. Nevertheless, we will view these constructs through the lens of the socio-cultural perspective by Vygotsky for reasons that Dr. Hue will outline later. And from this lens, identity formation is seen as originating from participation in socio-cultural practices, context, and it involves teachers' emotional responses and agency to navigate these practices and contexts. So as you can see, we have highlighted some keywords like participation, emotional responses, and agency. And because of these reasons, and within the broad socio-cultural framework, we will adopt the concept of identity in activity proposed by Russell Cross. Or in other words, our theoretical framework will be chart or cultural historical activity theory. And And besides the control historical activity theory, we'll also draw on the recent synthesis by Kay Ada. Um, in this synthesis, she has argued that agency, identity, and emotion exist in a unity. So based on this concept of unity between agency, identity, and emotion, and the notion of tensions in control historical activity theory or chart, we have outlined the three research questions that we'll aim to answer in our study. The first one is what major activities across the past, present, and future shape Vietnamese EFL preservice teachers' professional becoming? And second, what tension do they experience in these activities and how do they respond to these tensions emotionally and agentively? And last one, in what ways do the emotional and agentic responses to the tensions shape the teacher identity constructions? And in the next part, Dr. Hue will talk more about our theoretical framework. So over to you, Dr. Hue.
Thank you, Minh. All right, so before I go into the theoretical framework, I just wanted to mention that the new thing that we're looking at in this particular study is the role of tensions in underpinning the participants' expressions of emotional experiences, agency, and construction of professional identity, as you can see in the at the bottom of the diagram there. So that's the new element of our study. And in order to achieve the goals that we have set through the research questions, we use a third generation of activity theory or chart in short form as our theoretical framework. It has evolved through a number of generations with the contributions of a number of scholars in the field, such as Vygotsky, Leontev, and Gostrom. So to provide you with a brief overview of what the different generations look at, the first generation focuses on mediation, a concept used by Vygotsky extensively, which is related to the small triangle you can see in the green circle there on the screen. So the subject, such as a person, when they act on an object, they are usually mediated by artifacts, such as using a computer to teach online, or using a theoretical framework to underpin a study, such as what we are doing now. The second generation expands the first generation by adding rules, community, and division of labor, as you can see in the red circle. The three elements at the bottom of that big triangle. So that's the focus of the second generation of activity theory. And within the red circle is called an activity system, which is also the unit of analysis in the second generation of activity theory. But in our study, we use the third generation, which is the model, the whole model you can see on the screen there. As the theoretical framework underpinning what we are investigating, we were investigating in this study. So for example, in a classroom, a teacher would be conducting the activity of teaching, and students would be carrying out the activity of learning. Although they are committed to two different activities, they potentially share some objects, such as both aiming to improve students' pronunciation, for example. That is what you can see in the middle there. There can be other objects that are different, but there can be potentially shared objects, as illustrated on the screen. This generation of activity theory has the potential to help us achieve the goals that we set for the study, because it is a framework to understand dialogue, multiple perspectives, and networks of interacting activity systems. And it uses a joint activity system, including at least two interacting activities, as you can see, as the unit of analysis. Now, this is the minimal model of a joint activity system, but in different situations, there can be more than 2 activities, and that is also the case in our study, which we will talk about in the findings a little bit later. So when we applied chart in our study, we were able to account for the various connected activities that the pre-service teachers engaged in order to become EFL teachers. And we'll illustrate on that a little bit later. We were able to examine activities in relation to past, present, and future across different spatial contexts, such as learning English in schools, learning to become teacher at university, and teaching in part-time jobs, and teaching in the future, for example. We will also be able to identify systemic functions, systemic contradictions, which are defined as historically accumulating structural tensions within and between activity systems. So when we look at this diagram on the screen, we can imagine that, for example, there can be some tensions within the subject. For example, a teacher may have different identities that are conflicting to each other. For example, as a mother, she may have different responsibilities that hinders her ability to complete her job as a teacher, for example. So that is a possible tensions within the subject. And there can be possible tensions between different elements of the activity system, such as between the subject, between the teacher and the community of her activity, such as between the teacher's beliefs about how to improve pronunciation and the other teachers in the schools beliefs about how to improve pronunciation, or about what is considered good pronunciation, for example. And there can also be tensions between some element in this activity and the second activity as well. So that is another kind of contradiction or tensions that we can identify using the chart framework. And finally, using chart, we were able to understand how pre-service teachers responded to these tensions emotionally and agentically in developing their professional identity and become teachers. So when we applied this theoretical framework, we also combined it with a qualitative case study approach to collect and analyze the data. The study was conducted at Babel, a teacher education institution in Vietnam. We involved 5 pre-service teachers in the larger project, but in this particular presentation, we are reporting findings about 2 of those participants only. Both of these participants were in their final year in the Bachelor of TESOL program at Babel, and they had very different backgrounds. So what you can see in the table here is information about Anne and Beck, the 2 participants of focus. So Anne was born and grew up in Hanoi, and she attended extensive formal and private English classes during her school years. And at Babel, she was attending a fast-track TESOL entry selective TESOL program. On the other hand, Beck was born and grew up in northern Vietnam and only attended formal English classes at school. And at Babel, she was attending a mainstream TESOL program that the majority of the pre-service teachers attended, which is quite different from the selective entry program that Anne attended. And we collected data, narrative data, using 2 methods, narrative frames and interviews. So what we did was we sent the participants who had already consented to participate a Word document in which we provided sentence starters, such as I started learning English at or what I don't like about my English learning at school was, for example, so on and so forth. So they would complete these narrative frames in their own time and then send that back to us. And we analyze the narrative frames and devise questions for the interview based on that. So the individual interview that followed from the narrative frames function as a tool to elicit further information to dig deeper into the themes that appeared in the narrative frames. And these two sources of data were analyzed using thematic analysis, which was guided by the research questions that Minh described and the chart framework with the help of NVivo as well. A software for managing and analyzing qualitative data. In terms of findings, in relation to the first research questions, we found that the two participants went through three major activities, quite similar journey from learning English to learning to teach English and to teaching English. Because they all started learning English at school, and then they went to Babel to study to become English teachers, and they both wanted to become a teacher in the future. The other thing we identified in their joint activity system was that both had a shared object amongst the three sub-activities of becoming an English teacher, although this object was formed at different points in time in each of the participants' journey. And when you look at the diagram on the screen, you could also see that although the original theory presents two interacting activity system as a unit of analysis, in our study, we found three activities, and that is the capacity of the theory to expand to that. Right, so in relation to the second research and third research question, we examined the tensions that the pre-survey teachers experienced in their three activities, learning English, learning to teach, and teaching, as well as their emotional and agentic responses to these tensions and how they negotiated their professional identities in this process. So for the first participant, Anne, there was a tension between the community of her teaching activity and her shared object, as you can see represented by the red arrow here. So between the shared object and the community of her teaching activity. All right. So more specifically, when, as illustrated in the data excerpts on the screen, when she was applying for a part-time teaching job, she was asked to attend or observe a demonstrational class by a teacher at the center where she was applying to, in order to do her own teaching demonstration as part of the recruitment process. And she found that the teacher followed a listen and copy teaching approach, which she was very bored with, as you can see in red here. And she had that emotional response because she had formed an aspired or ideal identity similar to that of her past IELTS teacher. So as you can see in the second quote here, the tensions, emotion and of boredom and her aspirational identity motivated her to agentively decide to follow the favored teaching approach, and at the same time look for opportunities to further her studies and gain teaching experiences overseas in order to develop into this type of teacher. So this example illustrates an interrelationship between tension, emotion, agency, and professional identity. And in our second case, Beck also experienced a tension in her joint activity system, as you can see, between her current self or current identity as a pre-service teacher and her future self as a teacher. So as a pre-service teacher, she views herself as lacking in confidence she aspires to become a confident teacher in the future. So there is a gap in her confidence there, which she wished to bridge. So the expression "have to" in this quote, in red here, shows her strong emotional response to the tension and her strong commitment to resolve the tension in her learning to become a teacher.
Excuse me,
The words in green,
I have 5 minutes left.
Oh, good, thanks. The words in green show her agency in navigating the tension and emotion, which involved building confidence through work experiences in different contexts. This example also demonstrates the unity of tension, emotion, agency, and identity, in which the tension functioned as the driving force behind the interrelation between these the other three elements. So with these two examples from the two cases, Minh is now going to talk about our conclusions and implications for research and practice.
Thank you, Dr. Hui. So because we're running out of time, I will be very quick here. So basically, our first conclusion, as you can see, is that the interrelationship between tension, emotional, and agency here. So basically, we have demonstrated that tensions led to emotional and agentic responses, and these responses in their turn shape and reshape the participants' identities. We have also corroborated the finding that emotion, agency, and identity exist in a unity, but this unity is dialectical. So based on these findings, we have a number of recommendations for teacher education. And the overarching recommendation is that, the tension, we need to have a positive view of tensions, and we shouldn't like avoid or walk away from them. On the contrary, we should leverage or capitalize on those tensions. And we need to figure out how to help student teachers mediate the tensions to resolve the tensions. And there are many ways for this to happen. And here we list a few possible options. So the first one would be to equip teachers with the strategies for emotional regulation, as mentioned in Nguyen 2018. And another viable solution would be to create mediational spaces. And so what are mediational spaces? So they are like safe spaces in which teachers and teacher educators can work together to help teachers externalize the tensions and then internalize the solutions. And there are various ways to achieve this. We can use teacher narratives or reflective practice. And here we would like to emphasize that, these solutions are not mutually exclusive. On the contrary, we should use them in combination. So we can use teacher narratives as the starting point for the reflective practice journey, for example. So this point has brought me to the end of our presentation today. Thank you so much for your attention. And if you have any questions and comments, would be very happy to receive them now. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Ms. Minh Hue Nguyen and Ms. Minh Ngo. I got 2 questions from the participation, and I would like to share with you. The first question is concerned about the theoretical framework that have been used in your research. Is your theoretical framework in your research the available framework or designed by yourself?
Thank you for a very good question. Yes, it is a theoretical framework that has been well established in the field. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, it has gone through a number of generations. Now we are talking about the 4th generation, but in this study, we are using the 3rd generation. And some major scholars working in that field include Vygotsky, Leonchev, Angostrom, and Dr. Lem Ngo in the future, as you can see, one of in our participants.
Yes, thank you.
So I would like to add to Dr. Hui that yes, the framework is very established, but then our innovative feature here, our contribution is that we're able to, combine the synthesis or the argument about the unity of identity, agency, and emotion of K-ADA with chat. So normally people would just research identity or agency or emotion, but here we do 3 in 1. So that's our main contribution to the literature.
I see. So I think that it seems to be, yes. So that,
Yeah.
I mean, that's so wonderful framework. Yeah. And the second question, let's come to the next slide. I think that maybe some of you have find out that one. So in fact, that is the questions related to the recommendation. So what are the recommendations for pre-service teachers, especially in new era of technology, which seem to be the privilege for new generation? Yes, so please.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think the main, there are a lot of things that teacher education, pre-service teacher education can do in this space to support pre-service teachers in their navigation and become teachers in the future. And technology is one of the areas that you can see pose a lot of brings about a lot of benefits to teaching and learning, but also pose a lot of challenges for student teachers as well. And that can be a space causing tensions and emotional experiences for pre-service teachers. So I would say for pre-service teacher education, it is important that teacher educators be aware of the tensions and help the pre-service teachers to become aware of the tensions that they are experiencing in their learning, and together work on how to resolve that those tensions productively in order to facilitate learning and development in that space. Because the theories demonstrate that tensions are actually opportunities for learning and development to take place. And if we can leverage these tensions productively, it becomes a space for learning to happen, and we should probe into that during the process of learning and teaching in teacher education. May, would you like to add something to that?
Thank you for your very comprehensive response. So I have very little to add here. I think that from this perspective of sociocultural theories, and technology is a very influential, very powerful mediator. And so, you know, as it's like a new tool, and when we introduce that into the activity system, there will bound to be, you know, tensions. And you're right. And actually, that's a very good question for further research. So if we just, you know, sit here and make recommendations, probably it will not make a lot of sense. Probably other researchers should, you know, explore the role of technology and using our same framework, and that will make a very productive area of research in the future. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you're interested in starting something like that, I'm happy to discuss with you. Just get in touch and share your ideas, and we're happy to discuss further how to the question of how to design that kind of study, so that you can come up with the questions that you would like to know. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for your very prompt and informative response. I think that if the participants have any questions, they can maybe contact with you via the email, because all of them got the email from the slide, right? So thank you very much for participating in this session, and thank you so much for the wonderful and informative presentation from the two speakers, Ms. Minh Hue Nguyen and Mr. Minh Ngo. I think that that is the end of the session, and I will stop the set screen right now so that all of us joining in this session can take a photos together. So can you please turn on your camera?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So all of you can turn on your cameras so that I can take a photos with all of you and with the two wonderful speakers here. So I will turn on the camera continuously so that I don't miss any wonderful moment here.
Yeah, just one minor thing. I just noticed that my email address on the introduction slide was incorrect. So it doesn't have .au at the end.
Oh, I'm sorry. So can you share with the correct email address in the chat box so that in case anyone would like to contact with you?
Sorry. Wrong button. Yeah, so I just sent my email address.
Yes, I see now. So thank you. So any participant that would like any questions, so you can contact by email with the speaker here to the correct email in the chat box. So thank you very much for checking in this session.
Thank you, everyone.